Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The United States Senate rejected a resolution Wednesday that would have directed the removal of U.S. armed forces from hostilities with Iran, as Iran's government said the death toll from joint U.S.-Israeli attacks passed 1,200. 52 Republicans were joined by Pennsylvania Democratic Senator John Fetterman on a procedural vote opposing the War Powers Resolution. This is Mississippi Republican Senator Roger Wicker.
I'll vote no on the pending resolution. President Trump decided to attack Iran. That decision was profound, deliberate, and correct.
44 Democrats and 2 independents voted to advance the War Powers Resolution, joined by Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul. That fell short of the 51 votes needed to pass. Georgia Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock spoke ahead of Wednesday's vote.
The declaration of war is not a power that the President of the United States has. The Constitution makes it clear the declaration of war is the authority and the responsibility of Congress.
Meanwhile, Politico reports some Democrats are not ruling out voting in favor of a multi-billion-dollar infusion of new funding to the Pentagon. The White House is reportedly considering asking Congress for $50 billion in new funding, on top of $990 billion in military funding already approved by Congress in recent months. Sri Lanka's Navy says it's rescued 32 Iranian sailors and brought them to a hospital for treatment after an Iranian warship was torpedoed by a U.S. submarine in the Indian Ocean. Sri Lankan officials said they'd recovered 87 bodies from the ship's wreckage after it was struck without warning in international waters near Sri Lanka's coast. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth celebrated the attack on Wednesday.
An American submarine sunk an Iranian warship that thought it was safe in international waters. Instead, it was sunk by a torpedo.
Secretary Hegseth added the U.S. and Israel are in the process of crushing Iran's government, quote, without mercy. Iran's foreign ministry says U.S. and Israeli attacks have struck 33 civilian sites across Iran, including hospitals, schools, residential areas, and historic sites. Earlier today, airstrikes destroyed Tehran's Zadi Stadium, which has hosted international soccer matches. Meanwhile, 2 Iranian Red Crescent Society paramedics told Middle East Eye last weekend's bombing of an elementary school in southern Iran was a so-called double-tap airstrike, with the second strike coming after the school's principal called parents and told them to come and pick up their children. The strikes killed about 175 people, most of them young girls. Meanwhile, Iranian missiles reportedly targeted a base housing an Iranian Kurdish force in neighboring Iraq Thursday. The base is one of several where Iranian Kurdish separatists say they're preparing to launch an insurgency with U.S. backing against Iran's government. Iran is continuing to strike at U.S. military bases across the Middle East and the countries that host them. Iraqi forces say they shot down a drone targeting a U.S. base near Baghdad International Airport. Saudi Arabia's military says it intercepted and destroyed 10 drones and 2 cruise missiles. In Kuwait, an 11-year-old girl was killed when the remnants of a rocket hit her home. In the United Arab Emirates, 6 people were injured by falling debris from drones that were intercepted in the skies over Abu Dhabi. In Kuwait, an oil tanker anchored in the port of Mubarak al-Kabir reported a large explosion Wednesday, one of 5 ships in the region that reported attacks over the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, Azerbaijan says Iranian drones struck its territory Thursday, hitting an airport terminal and falling near a school building. 2 civilians were wounded. Azerbaijan summoned Iran's ambassador, demanding a clear explanation and threatening a response. Iran's foreign ministry later denied targeting Azerbaijan. Meanwhile, Iran's armed forces have denied firing any missile towards Turkish territory after Turkey's military said a ballistic missile fired towards Turkish airspace was shot down by NATO and missile defense systems. Israel's military has ordered tens of thousands of additional residents of southern Lebanon to evacuate dozens of villages or face death. An Israeli military spokesperson posted a message in Arabic on X reading, quote, "Residents of southern Lebanon, you must move immediately to areas north of the Litani River," unquote. Some 200,000 people live in the region. On Thursday, there were massive traffic jams as panicked residents piled personal belongings into cars and headed north. Meanwhile, Lebanon's health ministry says Israeli attacks have killed 8 more people across Lebanon, with several airstrikes overnight in southern Beirut. Beirut neighborhoods where Israel had issued forced evacuation orders. On Capitol Hill, a Marine Corps veteran suffered a broken arm as he was dragged out of a hearing by Capitol Police Wednesday after he disrupted a Senate hearing to protest the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. The veteran, Brian McGinnis, resisted as he was aggressively pulled by Capitol Police officers. Republican Senator Tim Sheehy of Montana joined the altercation. McGinnis's arm was broken after his hand became stuck in a doorframe. Elsewhere in Washington, D.C., demonstrators with the anti-war group Code Pink Thursday disrupted a Heritage Foundation conference protesting the think tank's role in crafting policies that boost military funding and support U.S. interventions overseas.
When they see a
flawless bubble, you stand up there talking about patriotism. You don't care about Americans. You don't care about your constituents. You care about that $500,000 in your pocket for AIPAC. Your constituents want health care and housing. They don't want to send their children to kill other children. They don't want their money.
Ladies and gentlemen, we live in the greatest country in the history of the world.
In climate news, new research suggests human activities causing ocean levels to rise far faster than government planners previously thought, with tens of millions more people at risk of losing their homes to rising seas. Researchers reviewed hundreds of scientific assessments, finding most of them underestimated baseline coastal water heights by 12 inches or 30 centimeters. A Texas Democratic Congress member warns there are at least 14 active measles cases at Camp East, Montana, a hastily constructed tent camp in El Paso where more than 3,000 immigrants are imprisoned. Another 112 people are being isolated. The ICE jail has recently had outbreaks of COVID-19 and tuberculosis and is rife with reports of inadequate medical care. Democratic U.S. Congress member Veronica Escobar warns the outbreaks threaten the greater El Paso community, yet she has never seen guards wearing masks to prevent the spread of highly infectious diseases. This comes as the Washington Post reports ICE is drafting a letter to terminate the facility's $1.2 billion contract. ICE dramatically cut its basic training program amidst a hiring spree meant to speed up the Trump administration's deportation efforts. That's according to records obtained by the Washington Post, which corroborate the claims of an ICE whistleblower who warned that ICE last year removed about 240 hours from its basic training program, or more than 40% of instructional time. On Wednesday, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem returned to Capitol Hill, where she was grilled by Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee about the killing of Renee Good and Alex Preti by federal agents. Once again, Noem refused to apologize for calling Good and Preti domestic terrorists almost immediately after they were shot dead. Meanwhile, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz appeared before the House Oversight Committee Wednesday, where he fended off charges from Republicans that he failed to prevent a social welfare fraud scandal, which the Trump administration used as a pretext to freeze Medicaid reimbursements to Minnesota. Walz said Minnesotans had been singled out and targeted for political retribution at an unparalleled scale.
Under the guise of combating fraud, the federal government has flooded Minnesota with masked, untrained, and unaccountable agents who are wreaking havoc in our communities. On the streets of Minnesota, federal agents have entered U.S. citizens' homes who have committed no crimes. They have violated the constitutional rights of our citizens. They have ignored court orders. They have shot first and asked questions later. Time and again, they have gaslit us by demanding that we ignore what we see before our very eyes. But the American people are not so easily fooled.
A massive blackout in Cuba has left most of the island, including Havana, without power. Cuban officials said the island's largest plant unexpectedly went offline. A U.S. oil blockade has cut off the Cuban government from accessing desperately needed fuel as the Trump administration intensifies pressure on Cuba. President Trump recently raised the possibility of a, quote, friendly takeover of Cuba, unquote. Meanwhile, Ecuador's expelled Cuba's ambassador and diplomatic staff, declaring them to be persona non grata. On Wednesday, Ecuadorian opposition lawmaker Hector Rodriguez criticized the move.
Este tipo de medidas mina la integración latinoamericana.
These kinds of measures undermine Latin America integration and undermine the possibility of having a union of neighboring countries that are brothers. We share a history and not only language and a cultural identity, but a way of seeing the world. Cuba and Ecuador have had relations for over 150 years.
Ecuador's decision to expel the Cuban diplomat came as the U.S. announced it had deployed special forces to Ecuador to conduct joint military operations with Ecuadorian commandos. Venezuela's interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, announced Venezuela will reform its mining laws in a move that will give the U.S. greater access to Venezuela's natural resources. Rodriguez made the announcement next to U.S. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum, who was in Caracas along with executives from more than 24 U.S. mining companies. Axios reports Trump officials have already brokered a massive U.S.-Venezuela gold deal. This all comes 2 months after the U.S. attacked Venezuela and abducted the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife, Celia Flores, who are currently in jail here in New York. The Republican-led House Oversight Committee has voted to subpoena U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi to testify about her handling of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein's case. Meanwhile, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has voluntarily agreed to testify. Last month, he admitted he and his family had traveled to Epstein's private island in 2012, contradicting earlier claims that he had cut off ties to Epstein in 2005. The House Oversight Committee has also asked Bill Gates, billionaire Leon Black, and Goldman Sachs departing general counsel Catherine Rumler to testify about Epstein. And a multi-year investigation into the Catholic Diocese of Providence, Rhode Island, has found Catholic priests sexually abused hundreds of children for decades and were protected by bishops who put the reputation of the church above the well-being of survivors. The report by Rhode Island's Attorney General found 75 Catholic priests molested more than 300 victims since 1950, though the true number of victims and abusive priests is likely much higher. Only a quarter of those named in the report, or just 20 people, face criminal charges. Of those, just 14 were convicted. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.